To open the LCD, click the button to unlock and open it. There's three basic principles behind the exposure, which makes it too bright or too dark for your footage. So you've got the gain, which is how strong your sensor is going to be. You've got the iris, which is how open your lens is to let draw in the light. You've also got the shutter speed or the frame rate. It could be 25 frames per second, 60 frames per second, or anything on these lines, depending on what camera you're using. For this one, second from the top left is the shutter button. Top right is the plus and minus. Press these to change the shutter speed. Also, down here is the iris. This basically is how wide or how narrow your lens is going to be, so it can draw more light in. This also changes how big or small of a depth of field your camera is going to have on the footage. And that's basically this wheel here. Alternatively, you can flick this switch onto iris, so this wing here now changes the iris. But we normally don't do that. Should you ever want to take the lens hood off, simply turn to the left and pull. Easy. The lens hood is used so it can obstruct the light and it won't get in the way of your lens. Also, it helps protect the lens itself. But the auto white balance button is on the front left, or the front right, sorry. And this basically changes the coloration of the kelvins. So you keep hold of it with at least 80% of any white paper you can find covering the lens, making sure that the light is touching it, and that basically corrects the light so it is fully white. Otherwise you might have a blue tinge or an orange tinge. Over here is the line or mic input. Line is basically where you're connecting it to a sound box or a light box. You also might want to know, if you're using mono sound, then you should use the second input. The first one is for if you're using stereo sound. It's important because otherwise if you're using the first input one, then it might not work unless you change the settings behind the LCD. The bridge over here has a microphone on the front. You can change it so it's a mono sound on the left microphone or the right microphone, or you can have a stereo sound, but we tend to use the external microphones. There's a hot shoe on the top, and also there's the mount for a normal microphone, whichever one you choose. There's a recording button on the top, and also the zoom, as well as on the top here where your hand goes through. Once you've set the shutter speed or the frame rate, which is where you want to export your footage to, it could be the cinema, it could be TV, anything like that. You also sort your aperture, so that's your depth of field, but the gain is the last thing you want to change, and that's in dark situations. Otherwise, as said, you have it in low. But you can have the ND filter on, and if you boost it up over here, then it automatically puts a filter obstructing the lens, so the light is harder to penetrate it, and in doing so you've got a darker image, but that also does well in full sun light. One more thing is, if you're using the sound, then you can adjust it over here. There's a channel 1 and channel 2. Over here, on this side of the lens, you've got the inputs for the XLR leads, which connect to the microphones. But you change the volume of the input for these via these two dials. If you'd like to know any further, check out the book.